You embarrassed yourself tonight. That's what she said. She stood by the kitchen sink, arms crossed, the glow of the fridge light cutting across her face like a spotlight at the end of a failed audition. She wasn't angry. She was disappointed, like I was the one who'd ruined everything. Like I was the reason for the fracture we were standing in. And maybe I was. But let me back up 5 hours. Not all the way, not to our wedding, not to the first kiss in that clumsy parking lot behind the movie theater, not even to the night she called me crying because her dad was in the hospital and she said I was the only one who made her feel safe. No, just 5 hours. That's all it takes to destroy a foundation you spent years pretending was still solid. She invited me to some work mixer, something at a rooftop bar with fake candles and real martinis. I was the plus one, like I always am. Not the guy who mattered. Just the guy who showed up because it was expected. The moment we arrived, I noticed him. Him, the guy I'd heard about in scattered mentions and offhand stories. The one who handled her campaign materials. The one who totally saved the presentation last month. The one whose name she said in her sleep once and swore it was part of a dream she couldn't remember. I noticed the way her voice lifted half an octave when he greeted her. The way she adjusted her dress when he leaned in for a hug that lasted 2 seconds too long. I noticed, but I didn't say a word, because I'd become a man of silence. A man who learned that speaking meant confrontation, and confrontation meant being told I was overthinking again. He made a joke about how she was the real boss of their department. Everyone laughed. I didn't. I was watching her eyes. They weren't on me. They never were anymore. Later, after a few drinks and polite conversations I wasn't really part of, I heard something. I wasn't supposed to. I was in the restroom hallway, just outside the staff door. They were inside, her and him. He was saying something too quiet to make out. But she was laughing. Not the kind of laugh you give a coworker. The kind you give someone who makes your stomach flutter. And then she said it. He gets in these moods where he thinks I'm hiding things from him. It's exhausting. No anger. No guilt. Just a casual observation, like she was describing a leaky faucet. I walked back to the table and said nothing. We stayed another hour. I smiled when she introduced me to more people I'll never see again. I nodded when she talked about an upcoming product launch I knew she never told me about. Then we got home. And I said it. You talk about me like I'm some obligation you're stuck with. That's when she turned. Cold. Defensive. Eyes narrowed like I'd stepped out of line. And she said the thing I'll never unhear. Well, maybe if you acted less pathetic, I'd feel like I had a partner instead of a shadow. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stared at her. And somewhere between her words and the silence that followed them, something in me cracked so quietly I almost missed it. This wasn't about a single night. This had been happening for a long time. I just hadn't been brave enough to see it. But I would be. Starting tomorrow. And that's where the Rael story begins. She didn't speak to me the next morning. Not even a look. There was no cold shoulder. No anger. Just vacancy, like I was a hotel room she had already checked out of but hadn't turned in the key yet. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring coffee I didn't want, watching the dust float through the sunlight like suspended time. I kept hoping she'd say something. Anything. Even if you misunderstood, or a sarcastic jab I could grab onto. But all she did was grab her bag, smooth down her blazer, and say, "Don't forget to lock the door when you leave." Like I was the house sitter. Like none of last night happened. She left. I stayed there in that chair for 2 hours. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I waited long enough, the air in the room would tell me what to do next. Eventually, I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and sat on the edge of our bed. Our perfectly made bed. Her side untouched, the way it always was now. She'd started sleeping in the guest room for her sleep schedule, but the real reason hung between us and all the unspoken spaces. I should have gone for a walk. Called someone. Done anything except what I actually did. I picked up her laptop. I told myself it was just to check the calendar, to see if she had any late-night meetings this week. That was the lie I used to unlock it. The password was the same as it had always been, his birthday. No, not Carter's. Her brother's. The one who passed away in a car accident when she was 16. It used to be a sign of vulnerability. Now it just felt like a password to a version of her that didn't exist anymore. At first, everything was normal: emails, spreadsheets, video calls. But then I saw the folder. It wasn't hidden. It was just there. Like it wasn't meant to be seen, but also not meant to be concealed. C+D strategy notes. That's what it was called. C and D. Carter, and what? Not me. My name didn't start with AD. I clicked. Inside were subfolders. Marketing pitches. Conference photos. presentation decks, and a video. I clicked the video. It was just 30 seconds long. The screen showed a hotel bar, dim lighting, trendy decor, probably one of those rooftop lounges with $12 cocktails. And there they were, her and Carter, sitting way too close, laughing, leaning in. His hand grazed hers, and she didn't move away. If anything, she leaned further in. The video ended with her whispering something, inaudible, but her face said enough. My hands were trembling, but not with rage. It was something worse, a mix of humiliation and clarity. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined this shift. I had just been unwilling to face it. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message. From her. It wasn't meant for me. Brenna, I'll see you at 8. Same room as last time. Don't forget the red wine, this time winking face. That's when I stopped breathing. Not for long. Just long enough for the numbness to settle into my chest. My first thought wasn't even betrayal. It was confusion. Confusion over how someone could live so casually in a double life. How I could be this invisible. And then something strange happened. I laughed. I laughed out loud in that empty room, holding my phone, staring at her message, because something in me finally snapped in a clean, beautiful way. Not with rage. Not with bitterness. Just with finality. I didn't reply. I didn't confront. I just stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled out the one thing she forgot I still had. The key to the safe. The one we used to store documents, emergency cash, and something she definitely didn't expect me to find. Inside, behind our passports and insurance papers, was a second phone. I turned it on, and that's when I realized this story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about how far it had already gone without me even knowing, and what I was going to do now that I finally knew everything. I should have put the phone down, but I didn't. I sat cross-legged on the carpet of our bedroom, holding a device I hadn't known existed until 10 minutes ago, scrolling through a version of my wife I had never been introduced to. Not fully. The screen lit up with text that read like private diary entries never meant for daylight. Only it wasn't a diary. It was a thread of casual, sometimes flirtatious, sometimes soul-bearing messages between her and Carter, stretching back over a year. I read everything. Slowly. Deliberately. Like I was performing an autopsy on the remains of my marriage. At first, it was harmless. Office banter. Mild frustrations about management. But then the tone shifted, gradually, like a slow-motion landslide. Brenna, you actually listen to me. I forget what that feels like sometimes. Carter, you deserve to be heard. Always. A week later. Brenna, he doesn't notice when I change my hair anymore. You did. And then, 2 months ago. Brenna, sometimes I wish we'd met before I got married. That one hit like a car crash with no brakes. I had to reread it. It was dated 2 days after our anniversary, the same night she gave me a pair of socks and said, I didn't have time to do anything big this year. Hope that's okay. That night, she was already his. I kept reading. Screenshots of dinner reservations. A blurry photo of the wine they shared just to unwind after work. A voice note from her I played over and over. Her whispering, I wish I were next to you right now. Followed by the clink of a glass. But it wasn't just romantic. It was cruel, too. I didn't expect that. She had a separate note in her notes app. Not locked, not even hidden. Just sitting there like an open wound. The title was Reasons I Stay. I thought maybe it would be a list of things about me. Reasons she was torn. Reasons she still held on. Instead, it was a countdown. Until the next raise clears. Until Dad's estate finishes processing. Until Carter's lease is up. Until I can explain it without guilt. The final line? He won't fight it. He never does. She meant me. That's what gutted me more than the cheating. It was the fact that she knew I wouldn't stop her. She'd built her timeline around my silence. She'd built a secret future on my passiveness. I closed the phone, my fingertips still tingling from holding it. And then I heard a car pull into the driveway. Panic didn't hit me. That would have been normal. What I felt was something worse, performance. I immediately went into act like nothing's wrong mode. Because that's what I always did. Pretend. Delay. Endure. But this time was different. Because for once, I knew everything, and she had no idea. She walked in through the back door with a soft hum, keys jingling, tossing her bag on the counter like nothing had shifted in the universe. I sat in the same chair I'd been in when she left that morning. Hey, she said, like nothing was off. How was your day? I stared at her. Just watched the way she took off her coat, how she opened the fridge with one hand and popped a grape into her mouth with the other. As if there wasn't an affair living inside her phone, inside her laughter, inside her body. I waited for her to turn around. She didn't. So I asked one question. Not, are you cheating on me? Not, why are you doing this to us? No. Those would have given her control. This question didn't. Do you think Carter's ready to ruin his life the way you're so willing to ruin mine? She froze, still facing the fridge. She didn't speak, didn't flinch. She just stood there, a grape half-chewed in her mouth. And that's when I realized she wasn't shocked by the question. She was calculating her response. This wasn't a secret that slipped. This was a strategy unraveling. And I was finally, not playing defense anymore. But that moment was just the start. Because what she said next, that's what changed everything, and it wasn't an apology. It was a decision. She turned around slowly, closed the fridge door like she was ending a chapter, and leaned against the counter with a look I hadn't seen on her face in years, not guilt, not panic. Relief. Like I had finally caught up to where she already was, and we could skip the messy middle part. What do you want me to say? She asked, arms folded, eyes locked on mine. Not shaking, not defensive. Just still. There was no room for confusion anymore. The phone, the texts, the second life she'd been living in plain sight, and I had the evidence sitting in the drawer behind me like a lit fuse. But I didn't reach for it. Instead, I watched her closely, wondering if I'd missed the signs long before Carter, long before the rooftop drinks, long before the silence in bed. You could start with the truth, I said. She smiled, just barely. The truth changes nothing. And that was it. That was the first real sentence that hit me like a bullet. Because it was the answer to every question I'd been asking myself for months. The reason she'd stopped trying. The reason she didn't delete the messages or lock the phone. In her mind, we were already finished. The only thing left was how the ending would play out, loud or quiet. She was betting on quiet. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked, how long? She looked away for the first time, like the length of the betrayal was more offensive than the betrayal itself. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said, that rehearsed line that people use when they know they've chosen something too many times to still call it an accident. How long? I asked again. She took a breath. 8 months. I nodded. Not because it made sense, it didn't, but because I finally had a timeline to attach to the erosion. 8 months ago was when she'd stopped asking me how my day was. 8 months ago was when she stopped saying goodnight, and instead, just disappeared into the guest room under the excuse of needing better sleep. 8 months ago was when I stopped existing as someone worth talking to. I see, I said. And that was the moment I saw something flash in her eyes, not pain, not guilt. Pity. That slow, dangerous kind of pity that comes when someone's already decided they're stronger than you. I didn't want to hurt you, she added, softly. Then why did you? I asked. She shrugged. I don't think I ever believed you'd do anything about it. And there it was. The real truth. She hadn't cheated because of Carter. She hadn't chosen someone else because she fell in love. She had done it because I had trained her, unknowingly, to believe that no matter what she did, I'd be there. Stable. Predictable. Quiet. I should have left the room. I should have walked away with what little pride I had left. But I was tired. So tired of holding it all together like it was a one-man show. So I stood up slowly and said something I hadn't planned. I'm glad you finally said it out loud. She raised an eyebrow. Said what? That you never expected me to matter. She opened her mouth, maybe to object, maybe to manipulate, maybe to lie again, but I didn't give her the space. I walked to the kitchen drawer, took out the second phone, and placed it on the counter between us like a dead bird on a doorstep. I know everything, I said. Silence. She stared at the phone for a long time, too long, then picked it up, unlocked it with a fingerprint, and calmly navigated to the settings. She hit reset all content. Just like that. Wiped clean. Like it was a chore she'd been waiting to do. You already saw it, she said. No point keeping the mess. I watched her erase an entire relationship, or at least the evidence of it, in 6 seconds. What now? She asked. That's what stunned me. Not the affair. Not the phone. Not the betrayal. What stunned me was how ready she was for the next phase. She had already gamed it out. The conversation, the fallout, the separation, maybe even the lawyers. She wasn't panicked. She was prepared. I looked at her for what felt like hours but was probably just seconds. And then I asked the one question she wasn't ready for. What if I don't play your ending? Her face faltered, just slightly. That tiny flicker in her eyes told me she hadn't considered that I might not follow the path she laid out. But I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out the door without grabbing my keys, without grabbing my wallet, without grabbing anything that reminded me I was someone who used to belong in that house. I had nowhere to go. But for the first time in months, I knew I couldn't stay. I ended up at a gas station 30 miles from home. I couldn't tell you how. I didn't have a plan when I left, just a direction, any direction. I drove until the roads turned unfamiliar and the GPS lost its signal. That felt appropriate somehow. I sat on a faded green bench outside the convenience store, sipping black coffee from a plastic cup that tasted like burned hope. There was a man sitting at the other end of the bench. Early 60s, maybe older, with eyes that had seen more things than his mouth would ever admit. He didn't ask me anything. He didn't have to. I guess I wore the look of a man who just stepped out of his own story and realized he hadn't been the main character for a long time. "You're not the first guy to sit here like that," he said finally, without looking up. I gave him a half laugh. "Yeah," he nodded. "They always come in looking for something they can't buy inside. Usually leave with cigarettes and silence." I didn't respond. I didn't have anything clever to say. I just watched the traffic roll by on the wet pavement and thought about how strange it is that life keeps going even when yours is frozen. My phone buzzed 3 times before I even checked it. 3 messages. All from her. "Brenna, where are you? Brenna, we need to talk before this gets worse. Brenna, please don't make this dramatic." That last one. That's the one that stayed with me. Please don't make this dramatic. She betrayed me for 8 months, maybe more, built a private world inside our shared life, and now she was worried about my response ruining the script. As if the true disaster wasn't what she'd done, but whether I'd react publicly or emotionally or in a way that made her uncomfortable. I turned the phone over in my palm and thought about calling someone. But who? I hadn't told anyone. Not family. Not friends. Because I was embarrassed. Not just of what she did, but of who I had become in that house. A quiet observer. A man who folded inward every time something felt off. A man who told himself it wasn't worth a fight until there was nothing left worth fighting for. Eventually, I drove to a cheap roadside motel. The kind with scratchy bedsheets and a buzzing bathroom light. I paid cash. No ID required. The woman at the desk didn't even look up when I handed her the money. I guess heartbreak doesn't stand out in a place like that. The room smelled like mildew and old air conditioning. I sat on the edge of the bed and turned on the TV, but I didn't watch it. I just stared at the screen, mute and glowing, while my mind did laps around every moment I should have spoken up but didn't. At some point, I started writing. Not a letter. Not a revenge post. Just thoughts. Into my phone's notes app. I didn't know what else to do with them. Here's what I wrote. She didn't lie with words. She lied with smiles, with absence, with the way she started dressing nicer on Tuesdays. I thought love would make her stay. I didn't know comfort would make her leave. I thought I was building something. She was counting down. I wasn't sleeping next to my wife. I was sleeping next to a plan. I stopped after that. Not because I ran out of things to say, but because it finally hit me that I was grieving someone who wasn't dead, just elsewhere. Living a version of her life that had no room for me. The next morning, I opened my phone to find a new message from an unknown number. No name. Just one line. "He's not going to wait forever. You need to decide." I stared at it for a long time. Because whoever sent it wasn't just threatening to replace me. They were already assuming I was out of the picture. And suddenly, this wasn't just a failed marriage. This was a quiet eviction, one I hadn't realized was already signed and sealed. I didn't respond to the message. I just stared at it, rereading it like it might change if I blinked enough. But it stayed the same, one cold sentence from an unknown number, sent at 6:02 a.m., like it was part of a morning checklist. "He's not going to wait forever. You need to decide." What struck me wasn't the message itself, but the word decide. It meant she hadn't chosen yet. Or maybe she had, but hadn't delivered the news. Either way, I wasn't the one making the choice anymore. I was the one being selected, like a resume on a shortlist. Around 10 a.m., my phone vibrated again. A new notification. Not a message this time. Calendar invite, conversation, 1 p.m. at Marlowe's. Confirm attendance. No sender. No name. Just an address. Marlowe's was a small corner cafe near her office, dim, quiet, and upscale enough to keep people's voices low. I hadn't been there in years. She used to go there for lunch with coworkers. I remember because she always came back smelling faintly of espresso and unfamiliar cologne. I should have deleted it. I should have blocked the number and checked out of that motel for good. But I didn't. I accepted the invitation without even realizing I'd pressed the button. I showed up at 12:57. The cafe was nearly empty, two men in suits talking softly in the back, a woman scrolling through her phone at the window seat. And then her. She was seated at a small round table near the back wall, legs crossed, stirring tea that had already gone cold. She looked up the moment I walked in, like she'd been rehearsing this scene and needed her cue. "You came," she said quietly. I sat down without speaking. My hands were cold, but my mind was louder than it had been in weeks. "I didn't send the message," she said quickly, as if reading the accusation on my face. "But I knew it would come eventually." He's impatient. I nodded once. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even hiding it. Just laying it out like bullet points in a quarterly report. "You've been gone for 2 days," she said. "I didn't know what you were thinking." "That was the point," I replied. "You've had months to plan. I figured I could have 48 hours. She flinched, barely, but didn't argue. I watched her reach into her purse and slide something across the table. A printed document. Stapled. "It's not what you think," she said. "There's no divorce yet. No property claims. I wanted to show you I'm not hiding anything." I opened the stapled pages. A typed list. Schedules. Budgets. Flights. Not financial records, plans. For her and Carter. Outlines of what cities he might relocate to, her projected career mobility, even options for a shared lease. The future, written out like a logistics sheet. "I'm not asking you to sign anything," she added. "I just thought you deserved to see what was going to happen if you walked away quietly." There it was again. The theme. Quietly. Everything about her betrayal was built around my silence. She was banking on it. Had always been. "Why the details?" I asked. "Why give me a look inside your escape plan?" Her eyes didn't move from mine. "Because I know you. You won't fight for what's already broken. But you might lash out if you feel excluded." That was the moment it truly landed. She didn't fear losing me. She feared disruption. Her entire world was built on clean exits and tidy beginnings, no noise, no mess, just controlled damage. "So this is damage control?" I said. "It's a courtesy." That word. Courtesy. I nearly laughed. But it came out flat, bitter. "I spent the last 2 days trying to remember who we used to be," I said. "But all I can remember now is how quiet it got between us. Like we were tiptoeing around something we'd already killed." She looked down, finally. Stirred her tea again, even though it was too cold to dissolve anything. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said softly. "But you were willing to." That landed harder than I expected. She stopped stirring. Her face fell, not in regret, but in recognition. The conversation was over. The damage wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was named. Labeled. Understood. I stood up, folded the papers, and slid them back across the table. "I'm not going to fight you," I said. "But I won't make this clean for you, either." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not giving you the ending you scripted." I walked out without looking back. I didn't know where I was going next, but I knew what was coming. And for once, so did she. The first thing I did when I got back to the motel was open my phone and check the message thread. The unknown number was still there, still unnamed. I clicked on the profile icon, a blank gray circle, and stared at it like it might blink back. I started to type a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. Stopped. Eventually, I wrote just one word. "Why?" But I never sent it. Instead, I opened the Notes app again, and for the first time, I let myself scroll through the drafts I hadn't touched since we got married. Birthday ideas. Travel plans. Things she once said that made me laugh hard enough to write them down. The kind of digital artifacts that get buried under years of unread headlines and grocery lists. And right between anniversary weekend cabin rentals and baby names we never used, I found something I didn't remember writing. "If she ever leaves, don't let it be a whisper. Let it be a door slamming so loud the walls remember you were there." I didn't remember writing that. But there it was. Dated 4 years ago. Tucked between hope and delusion. That's when the knock came at the door. Not loud. Not frantic. Just 2 measured knocks, like someone was trained not to startle. I opened the door without thinking. It wasn't her. It was him. Carter. And he looked nothing like the ghost I had built in my mind. He didn't use arrogance. He wasn't holding roses or guilt or even excuses. He was just standing there in jeans and a dark gray jacket, hands in his pockets, like he had just parked and wandered up without planning to. "Do you have a second?" he asked. I didn't respond. I didn't move. Just studied him. This was the man my wife had chosen, or almost chosen, and here he was, asking for a moment like we were equals. I know how this looks, he added, but I'm not here to argue. Then what are you here for? I asked. He looked down at the floor like he was trying to remember his lines. She told me you saw everything, he said, that you weren't going to make a scene. You disappointed I'm not flipping tables? I asked, dry. No. Honestly, it makes this harder. That threw me. I expected indifference, condescension, but not difficulty. I just wanted to say, none of this was planned. Not like it looks. Let me guess, I said. It just happened? He nodded sheepishly. Kind of. We talked a lot. We got close. I didn't think it would go where it did. But once it didn't feel wrong. There it was. It didn't feel wrong. The sentence sat between us like a broken spine. And now? I asked. He hesitated. Now I don't know if she's making the right call. That caught me completely off guard. You came all the way here to tell me you're having doubts? He shook his head. I came here because I didn't want to be part of something if it was built on quiet exits and half-truths. I wanted to see you. Talk to you. Make sure she wasn't rewriting everything to make me feel better about it. That's when I realized something I hadn't considered. Maybe this wasn't just betrayal. Maybe she was playing both sides to avoid being the villain in either. She said I'd be fine with it. I told him that I wouldn't fight, that I never do. He looked uncomfortable. She said something similar to me, that you're not the type to complicate things. There it was again, the simplification of my silence. My restraint wasn't grace to her. It was convenience. And now it was bleeding into someone else's story, someone she hadn't even finished choosing. I'm not going to give you a speech, I said. But if you think she's going to walk away clean from this, you're wrong. He swallowed hard and nodded. Then, before he turned to leave, he said something I didn't expect. I think she's scared you're stronger than you look. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because I finally understood something. She hadn't chosen him because he was better. She had chosen him because he was easier. And now she wasn't sure she wanted that either. The next morning, I woke up to silence, not the heavy kind that used to wrap around our house like fog, but something cleaner. Still, honest. A silence that didn't need pretending. The motel room was cold. I hadn't slept well, but I didn't feel tired. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt clear. My phone had 17 notifications. Missed calls. Messages. Most of them from her. I didn't open them. Instead, I walked outside, barefoot on cracked pavement, and just stood in the light. It wasn't some poetic rebirth. I didn't cry or fall to my knees or feel washed in revelation. I just breathed. Deeply. For the first time in a long time, it felt like there was oxygen in the air again. Back in the room, I took a shower, shaved the scruff that had formed, and looked at myself in the mirror. Not the man she had quietly left behind. Not the passive observer of his own life. Just a guy, a little broken, a little raw, but finally awake. That afternoon, I went home. Not to ask for anything. Not to plead. Just to close the door properly. She was there when I arrived. Sitting on the edge of the couch, face pale, eyes red. She stood up fast when she saw me, like she wasn't sure if she should run or speak. I didn't know he'd come to see you, she said quickly. I figured, I replied. She searched my face for something anger, sadness, maybe softness. But I didn't give her any of those. I gave her what I came for. I'm not going to punish you, I said. But I'm not going to carry this for you either. You made your choices. I'm making mine. She nodded. I understand. I doubt it, I said. But that's okay. You don't need to. She looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. So, what now? I start over. It was simple. Final. Not cruel. Just true. She tried to speak again, but I raised a hand gently. Not to silence her, to release her. Because dragging the conversation out wasn't going to fix what was already gone. I walked upstairs, packed 2 bags, grabbed the documents I needed, and left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. As I reached the door, she called after me. Lowell, she said softly, the first time she'd used my name like that in weeks. I paused. I really did love you, she said. I didn't look back when I answered. I know. You just didn't fight for it. And then I walked out. It wasn't dramatic. No doors slammed. No tears. Just a quiet ending to something that had quietly died. 2 months later, I was living in a small rental house a few towns over. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't full of new furniture or grand declarations of new beginnings. It was just mine. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I started hiking, even adopted a dog named Murphy who snored like a chainsaw and drooled on every pillow he found. I didn't meet anyone right away. I didn't need to. The point wasn't to replace what I lost. It was to rediscover what I'd given up on. Myself. The guy who used to laugh out loud. Who cooked dinner from scratch. Who wasn't always waiting for permission to be chosen. And one morning, while drinking coffee on the porch with Murphy's head on my lap, I realized something so simple it made me laugh. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for her. Not for closure. Not for answers I'd never get. I was finally living, not as a reaction to someone else's betrayal, but as a quiet, determined act of reclaiming my life. And that was more than enough.